Okay, we will go ahead and begin the meeting. My name is Jackie Rao. I'm the program manager for the Michigan Collaborative for Type 2 Diabetes. We really appreciate you all joining us today and our panelists for sharing how they've implemented best practices. We are really excited to hear from them and learn more about what they've done. Just as some housekeeping items, we do have a CME available for this meeting. If you're attending it live, we'll also make sure to send out the CME handout to you so that you have these instructions available. We just have to complete the evaluation by June 25th and text this number by tomorrow at 1. As far as continuing education credits that we're offering for this, we have medicine CME, nursing CE, pharmacy CE, and dietetic CPEU. And as far as disclosures, Dr. Ashman has stocks in some publicly traded companies and was part of the planning committee for this meeting. So with that, I'd like to welcome today's panelists. We're very excited to have you here and to learn from what you've done in your practices. We have Mary Wilson, Jennifer Becker, Dr. Shad Arkeel, Jessica Seward, Tiffany Jones, and Connie McDonald here to talk to us today about the works that they've instituted in their practices. So to go ahead and start and just learn about each panelist and the efforts that they've made, I was hoping we could all go around and have each panelist, and I'll call on you one by one, talk about the best practice that you've implemented in relation to the medications, low carb diets, or CGMs, and how you made those changes within your practices. Tiffany, can I ask you to go first?
Yes. Hi, my name is Tiffany Jones, and I think being part of the practice, referrals to the CDE has really helped at point of care. So originally, if the patient has new diabetes, a medication change, or they're not on a CG, or they don't have a CGM, a SGLT2, a GLP-1, or they want to make changes to their diet, they're referred right away to me. If I'm in the office, then I can come in and start right there with the provider. So now it's almost where I go into with the patients first, do a kind of a baseline recommendation, and then the providers go in. So it's really helped ease up their time and increase the use of the medications and our CGMs.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Connie, could you go next? You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. So in respect to the process that we have with care management in place, that's really helpful. We do physician referral as far as like CGMs or certainly the dietary and exercise counseling. And then I'm able to reach out. So I get tasked or I receive a referral, and then I'm able to contact patients and communicate with them, kind of see how they see their problems, or what kind of things would they like to do, based on chronic care management, motivational interviewing. And then once we get that implemented, and I need to back up a little bit. We have physician referrals, and then also I go through, do chart reviews. I find patients that have, some risk factors and things. So we're able to create a patient database that way as well for outreach. And then I've even gotten the MAs in part of the process as far as identifying certain risk factors, or if the patients say something, that would indicate a potential need or something certainly that could be investigated further, then they will even refer patients to me as well. So we're able to use a lot of different ears, if you will, right, throughout the practice in order to gain patients and be able to support those that need it in the best way. So that's kind of how our process overall, just for kind of a big view of it, has been working.
Thanks, Connie. That's great. I really like how you involve the MAs to maybe notice things that patients are saying too, and pick up on that and make sure you're capturing it like through multiple methods. Okay, Jessica, could I ask you to go next?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm Jessica. I'm a dietitian, diabetes educator, whatever the letters are that they use now for those things. And I've embedded in a couple of clinical practices where I'm working with the MCT2D initiative. So we had a standard process of care management where I was available to do on the spot kind of counseling with the patients. I have a proactive process of outreach as well for patients who aren't at their A1C goal. But it's specifically what we were seeking to do in the past year with the MCT2D was to increase our prescribing of the target medications. And I did a little bit of a formal process to accomplish that. I developed a couple of little staff training, education type things that I rolled out at the practices. We did sort of a PDSA cycle that really focused on the MA involvement in that, just because they're reviewing medications before the provider comes into the office. I also went through some of the MCT2D point of care tools with the providers, and we kind of experimented with how to make those more usable, I think. Not that they're not usable, but usable as in how do we get people to actually use them. And then we also, I did some networking with some pharma reps that were supplying the offices, the practices as well. So kind of a threefold process there with education, PDSAs, and then outreach to ancillary sources.
Great, thanks, Jessica. Can you talk a little bit more about how you have the MAs reviewing the medications prior to the providers coming in? What's that process look like? And what are you having them look for and bring up to them?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, they're asking the patients, they're already, standard practice was to ask the patients, what medications are you taking? Do you need any refills? That kind of thing. So we talked about just a quick 1 or 2 questions that they might ask to dig a little bit deeper into that. For instance, how do you feel like your medications are working for you? Those types of things to try and guide that discussion toward the next level of care. We kind of were targeting people who weren't at the A1C goal for some of those things. If it's not broke, I don't try to fix it, but there's plenty of opportunities where just a question or two, and the patient would be surprised and be like, well, actually, I don't know what it does. What is it doing? So just some education opportunities developed through that.
No, that's great. Thanks for elaborating on that. Jennifer, can I ask you to go next? You're muted still.
We have really tried to get more people on the CGMs. So we have tried to go through their, we haven't been using their traditional pharmacy. We've been using a pharmacy called Aspen, ASPN, to be able to kind of navigate the patient through that. And that has helped quite a few people to be able to obtain those quickly, which is great. We also have been really working to get people on to the newer medications, and we have seen that it is definitely bringing their A1Cs down.
Great. So the Aspen pharmacy that you work with, do they help determine the prior authorization requirements? And if a patient qualifies, are they more hands-on with getting the approvals and everything needed to start a patient?
Yeah, they do. They walk them right through that, and they try to figure out how they can get it for the patient at either no cost or the lowest cost.
Okay, great. Can you talk a little bit more about how, I know you said you've been working to get patients on the newer medications. Have you made any changes within the practices to facilitate that, and what's that looked like?
Well, it's just Nicole and I were the only providers in the office, and so we just we will do huddles often on patients to, see if the SGLT2s or the GLP-1s that have been initiated, or if it looks like that the patient would benefit from it. And so I think that has really helped, us doing more huddles.
Thank you so much. Dr. Akil, would you mind sharing your best practice and how you went about implementing it?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm an internist from a background, and I did some geriatric training, and I did certify in obesity medicine. My primary focus is actually at this point education to the patient from the perspective of starting to look at some initial lab values, which include obviously fasting sugar A1C, but I do focus on fasting insulin levels also, as long as they're not on insulin right now, and monitor that along with the BMI. But that invites us to have a discussion about the role of, low carb or restricted carb diets. And then it moves on to utilizing the CGM. Now, I do have to say that I'm actually using it a lot more also on people who are borderline diabetic, or if you call it insulin resistance. And the CGM, interestingly for me, obviously we look at the blood sugar reading, but frankly speaking, I try to have them focus on particular food types or food items specifically and see how their blood sugar respond to those kind of food items when they're taking them at breakfast, lunch, or supper, or at snacks. So we usually, what we've done is, when we start somebody on the CGM, I have them come back in 10 to 14 days. I'd sit down with them. I go over the numbers and we're able to look at the data. And then we primarily focus on a couple of things. We look at what is called glycemic variability, where, if you have a baseline blood sugar, let's say about 100 or something, and then it goes to 160 with certain kind of food, those are the food products we target and say, this is what your personalized values are in response to what you're eating. So whereas it's obviously helpful to tell somebody, pick a certain diet and then go with it, or, pick a certain group and stay away from those, including carb. But within the carbs and processed food category, I think there is variability in terms of personally what people respond to. So when we look at that continuous glucose monitor data, they learn quite a bit about what kind of foods are actually causing these mysterious elevations in their blood sugar. And then that helps them to sort of personalize their own diet plan, which I think has helped probably above and beyond what our general guidelines have been, for at least for myself, in terms of just telling them to pick a certain diet. And then we move on to obviously looking at their BMI and weight, and then relook at those numbers. Now, in terms of obviously GLP ones, we definitely are utilizing it more, because there is definitely a large portion of people who do have challenging BMIs, and we still work on that. That experience has been obviously very well received too. Obviously, the issue, like everybody else is probably noticing, is the shortage of the medications as well as the insurance coverage at times. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Akil. And Mary, can I ask you to share yours?
Hi, I'm Mary Wilson, and so our biggest successes is we definitely have increased the prescribing of the SGLT2 and the GLP-1s, and we did that through, at the beginning, I went out to all the clinical practices in teams with the clinical champions and got FaceTime with providers at all the meetings, and as well as diabetes education and pharmacy if they were in the house that day. So we really started out with a push for CGM and then the SGLT2 and GLP-1s. So that we've definitely seen an increase of the utilization of that. And then low carb diet, we have a low carb diet class, but that had some hiccups. It was developed for a group class by video. And so that's rolling out again. And so we're hoping as that becomes a little better fine-tuned. We had hiccups in terms of the the billing and cost factor. But the first one was well received by those who attended. And they know they're going to have to invite more to the class because you have even if it's just a one-time class, you have a % of drop off. So it has to be worth your while to do the group. You sign 15 up and only 7 come or whatever. So they're deciding bigger might be better just in terms of that. And then we're also developing, CGMs have exploded in our practice. Part of that was definitely the MCT2D initiative and then the discussion of it on a regular basis. And then we're also rolling out smart sets and the billing. We've got a smart set now for if you do the CGM read. And then we also have workflows, and we're getting more persons in the office trained how to upload the data and streamline how we put that on the schedule instead of each person doing it a little bit differently. And so providers are capturing the physician interp code, which in turn is encouraging its use even more than it was because they're looking at it once a month. And so we've built smart sets. We've had lots of involvement through our steering committee and our clinical champion meetings. We do those every other month. The pharmacists, we've rolled out more pharmacists in our office, and they're doing the CGM viewing and downloading, and rolling up their sleeves and doing more of the encouragement of the starts and the follow-ups in terms of cost and barriers. We're starting to use Parachute more. So that's helped, and the gates have opened a little more in terms of coverage. Not being as unwieldy. And then the new Medicare guidelines Medicare guidelines in terms of CGM has also already been a game changer for us. We were poised in June, and we have diabetes educators, but they've seen an increase in their referrals. So multiple levels of improvement.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done a ton, Mary. That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the low carb diet work groups? So is someone who leads them, and then is it like virtual that you're having patients join?
It's our diabetes education department, and
Okay.
they do group classes already.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they did during COVID, they started doing more video classes instead of in person. And so they felt for this one that it'd be good. So their first one they did in person, and attendance was low. A lot of people signed up, but now they're ready to roll. And they developed a book, and they're using, because they're now developed and trained on that, they're using the low carb diet guidelines even more in their one-on-one. So it's kind of a trickle up effect.
That's great. Okay, so thanks everyone for introducing us to the work that you've done in your practices. It sounds like there's been multiple really impactful changes. For these next questions, just for the sake of time and making sure that we leave some time at the end for all the attendees to ask questions, I've asked a couple panelists to respond to each of these. Before moving on to the next one, though, I'll make sure that no one has anything else to add, or if there's something that they want to share. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions from everyone. So the next question we have is, how has your physician organization supported you in making changes at your practice, or if you're representing from a physician organization, how you've supported the practices that are in MCT2D? Dr. Akil, can I ask you to speak to a little bit of how your physician organization has supported you?
So I think it's basically myself trying to look into my patient population and seeing how many I've actually have prescribed the CGM, and then following them in terms of how they're improving in terms of BMI as well as A1C. So I think within Epic, there's this slicer dicer tool that actually can give you that kind of reporting. So I haven't started doing it on a larger scale because we don't have a lot of patients yet, but that's how I think I'm going to approach them and see if I can actually have some kind of initial data and then roll it out to or share it with my other physician colleagues.
Great, thank you so much. Jessica, can you share a little bit about how you and your role at MedNet One support them, or how MedNet One supports you in your work?
Sure. I am the practice care managers, but I'm a co-located employee of the PO. So in that way, they're providing some, I'd like to think, substantial support to the practices, because really the initiative, implementation, and the improvements have been things that I've created and rolled out. I have some support from the PO as well. They do some things like reporting, running things that we can't get to from a practice level necessarily. And both of the practices that I'm at only have black and white printing capability. And a lot of these tools, the color coding in particular on some of them is really helpful. So they have printed slews of copies of things for us.
That's great. Right, Connie, what about you? You're on mute also.
Thank you. I had sirens in the background before, so
No.
I'd forgotten. What we do, the physician group, basically in the support of care management and just really giving us the opportunity to have that hands-on luxury of time to just really engage, with the patients and just truly engage with them on a very personal level, I feel like, and that really does add to their opportunities to make decisions about how they want to care for themselves, but also be able to learn about what are the best choices, right, that they can make from, and the opportunities for the CGM is beyond just fantastic. It truly is a driver for patient knowledge just to have that CGM on. I can't speak, well enough of them and the opportunity that it's afforded all the patients that can get them. The other thing too, I think the biggest thing is that the PHO offers the care management again, and they're very supportive of our group, and they do report out, to at a higher level of the impact that our group does have. So I feel like we are very supported for sure.
That's great. Yeah, care management is such a game changer in diabetes, exactly to your point, to be able to focus on an individual patient and their challenges. And like echoing back to what Dr. Akil said about just being able to look deeply at that CGM data and come up with personalized recommendations that fit like the person who's trying to make these decisions every day. So yeah, that's fantastic. Does anyone, before we go to the next question, any other panelists have anything they want to share related to PO support? Okay, great. So our next question is, were there any unexpected obstacles that you encountered when trying to make changes at your practice, and how did you troubleshoot these challenges? Tiffany, can I ask you to respond?
Absolutely. So with the referrals to the diabetes care manager, the way the practice was set up, the referrals go to one person at the front office. So then they go through them and then assign them. But she was getting them late. So she has like 1,000, every patient who has a referral she received. So in the beginning I wasn't getting, and they're like, oh, how was this person? Or, and I'm like, how am I so behind? And then we found that out. So it was just going back and getting charts, talking to the providers to see, was there more education that needed to be done, during the first couple of weeks that I was here. And then they're like, no, I referred Mr. Smith or this one. So then that's how we found out. But it was just talking. I mean, I could have very well assumed, oh, they don't need me, but there was so many, but yeah, just going back and educating and talking with the staff. But it was that protocol, the way it was set up for the referrals to go, that So it was an easy fix.
That's good.
Yeah.
So many things can be resolved through communication, but
Yeah.
that's able to get to the bottom of it.
Right.
Mary, can you speak to this as well, of any challenges you encountered and how you troubleshoot those challenges?
I guess one of the challenges we had was, well, we're a big organization, and so the one of the big challenges was getting everybody onto the same page, and that, the communication, it'd be like this, the CIN as a whole said, we're going to do this for everybody, but it was kind of whack-a-mole at the beginning, and then finally we started pulling everybody together and doing, and we got support for like FaceTime with all the diabetes educators at their meetings, all the care managers at their meetings, so that we finally rolled it out as one piece. And so we kind of learned our lesson, instead of like, okay, we're just going to start doing this, and then it loses its momentum. And even now with our smart sets, we've developed them. Some people are really using them. We're trying to make them as, quote, perfect as possible. And then they're going to start being rolled out as a whole package starting in the middle of the month, because the piecemeal doesn't work, and then people get burned. They can't do it. It doesn't make sense. And then they're done.
Great. Jennifer, would you be able to respond to this as well? Any obstacles you encountered?
I think the biggest obstacle is just communication between the patient, the pharmacy, and the office, and making sure that, that they're getting their medications on time, that there's not delays from PAs and things of that sort, or pharmacy not having the medication, it being on back order and those sort of things. So just having that good communication loop is probably the biggest obstacle I think that we've had.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Anyone else from the panel want to respond or chime in on this one before we move on to the next question? Okay, so next we are interested in hearing how you've measured the impacts of the changes that your practice has made. Jessica, I know you were potentially putting together some slides with some data. Did you want to share that, or do you want to just talk through it? Completely up to you.
I'm happy to share it. I think it's easier to see than to say.
Yeah, that would be great. I will stop my screen sharing.
Okay, I'm trying to. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So with our challenge for increasing the use of the target medications, I feel like a lot of times you think that you know what you're doing and you don't really know what you're doing. I find the same thing when I'm talking to patients. They think they know what they're eating, but when then you ask them, what did you have last night? They're like, what did I have last night? So I like numbers, and I tried to pull together some really concrete information for my practices to sort of be able to track the trend on where we're going. And this is one instance where we used the PO in order to pull some data. And there are some limitations to these data. They're based on claims. We don't have claims available for every payer, that kind of thing. But what I found overall for one of the practices that I'm in, the GLP use, last year we were able to measure 49 claims from the reporting period. And this year it was 143. So that data does represent more providers and more types of GLP-1s that we were able to measure. When I did a straight up comparison using only the information we were able to pull last year, we were still ahead by a small amount, but we had still increased our overall usage, which I feel is pretty significant given the challenges that we've had, especially early this year, getting those GLP-1s. So, these are actually claims filled. These aren't just scripts that were written. So.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing.
So when we look at the percent change across the practice for GLP-1s, they increased their GLP-1 use by almost 200%. So yeah. And then for the SGLT2s, this practice didn't do quite as well with that. When we looked at straight up comparison from last year, the claims were actually down. But what I noticed is that those basically converted over exactly into GLP-1 prescriptions. So there was a loss of 7 actual prescriptions for claims for SGLT2s, and there was a gain of 6 claims for GLP-1s. So, and practice-wide, the use of the SGLT2s did increase by 100% over last year. So, the second practice that I'm embedded in, we had similar successes practice-wide. Our GLP-1 claims have increased by 270% across the practice. Now, when you do a straight up comparison, there was actually a loss there of prescribing for the one physician. There's a physician who's kind of retiring, so that impacts the numbers a little bit. But SGLT2s is where this practice really saw huge gains. Their prescribing doubled on a straight up comparison from last year, and across the practice is up over 1,000% in claims. In part, that's due, I think, to some real financial challenges that their demographic has. So GLP-1s are a little bit of a tougher ask. SGLT2s have more moderate pricing. So they've really focused a lot on those. And with this practice, their kind of their standard initiation for those GLP-1s is to start with a sample in the office, and samples just weren't available. So I feel like they just weren't writing as many of them initially because of that kind of standard way that they would go through beginning the prescription just got kind of nicked in the bud. So, but overall, I feel like the practices has done an amazing job of fulfilling the mission from the initiative to use more of these meds. So thank you.
Yeah, these are fantastic results. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jessica. It's amazing the progress that's been made.
Now, if I can figure out how to stop sharing, there we go.
Don't worry, I can take it over.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Tiffany, would you be willing to share a little bit about how you've measured impact?
Yes, so referrals have multiplied. So I'm basically getting from the providers at least 10 referrals a week. And then that doesn't include the ones that are, just from reporting or from, because what we try to do is match our CQIs with the program and then run reports based on visits. So definitely referrals have increased. Our A1Cs have improved, or at least, patients are getting them done more frequent. And I think just being here in the practice more has really helped kind of guide that. So if they come across a, bump in the road, they can kind of, pass it off a little bit, and then we can follow up. So, and then also with the prior auths, as many of the other panelists said, like having that where the person who handles the prior auth can come, kind of have someone to look at it with them. It seems like the patients have been getting their prescriptions a little bit faster with not a lot of, more extra work on the staff who's doing the prior auth. So if it's anything related to diabetes medication or CGM, she gives it to me and we work on it together. So that's really helped.
Yeah, that sounds great. Mary, can I ask you to speak to this a little bit as well, how you've measured the impacts of change?
We've measured it by, and I don't have any fancy chart. We've measured it by A1C improvements and then and referrals to diabetes ed. And we've talked about doing the pharmacy claims, but we haven't looked at that, which would be really good. And then definitely we continue to work on streamlining the prior auth through, you know, like Parachute and stuff, and that's definitely increased the time out of medicines. We also, adding the pharmacist has also increased the patient assistance program. The SGLT2s have been really friendly with a lot of patient assistance programs. So that was kind of a surprise. You know, everybody thinks of injectables and forgets about the others.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Okay, great. Any other panelists want to share anything about measuring the impacts of change? Okay, so our next question was, what advice do you have for practices looking to improve either their prescribing rates or the medications or the CGM, or working with patients on low carb diet? Dr. Akil, do I want to ask you to speak to this a little bit?
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I am learning is, you know, when we talk about low carb diet or any other kind of diet, it is important to actually look at the CGM data and be able to look at the personal or individual responses to those foods, because frankly speaking, as I'm learning more, individual food groups or within that macro carb box, people could react very differently in terms of their glucose. So that really has helped me and my patients to understand that within the confines of a carb restricted diet, what kind of fruits or foods or vegetables they can eat or not, because their response could be very different than the next person, even though it is regarded as one single group of low carb diet. So that's, you know, where I'm seeing most of the education being helpful compared to what I've been telling my patients in the past. So I think that's a utility I see, especially for CGM.
Okay, great, thank you. Patty, can you speak to this a little bit?
Thank you. Yes. I think one thing, as far as, you know, using the continuous glucose monitors, if you want to start a program, get the reps, Libre View and Dexcom reps in particular, extraordinarily good. Of course, number one, MCT2D, the resources that you guys have rolled out and that you continue to support all of us in our processes to improve and to do, well, just consistently, we're able to improve the quality and accessibility to patients to have the knowledge and the support that they need in order to be successful, you know, in managing their disease process. It's this whole thing really with MCT2D, sorry, has really been an amazing experience, I think, for all of us as practitioners, and then certainly being able to impart that significant opportunity to work with patients and help them in their self-management. But one thing I would say is, you know, early in my work, it was a little bit more difficult. Of course, you're kind of, you know, it's new, so you're putting together a process, and it's very important to have the management and the PHO certainly backing you up, right? To make sure that everybody understands the significance of trying to get this program underway and make it work, you know, for the patients, and that it is indeed a team effort. You know, one person can't come in and I forgot, I think it might have been Mary, but like early on, she said they had some difficulty, you know, but get your whole team on board and make sure the MAs are included as well, because they're very important eyes and ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, having management in your PHO to start a process, and also the data from the apps is very important to get everybody on board, understanding how getting a process flow into place so that everybody can, because even I've struggled with that. So I recognize the importance of it and the significance of really getting a process in with the entire staff so that that information is available when that patient comes to see the doctor. The doctors, can in real time review that with the patient and make real time, it's an opportunity for improvement and for managing that patient better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Connie. That's a great answer. And Tiffany, what about you? What advice do you have for other practices?
Kind of similar as Connie said, just to make sure everybody knows about the program. You'll be surprised how many acronyms and they just kind of go together. And with everyone, the front staff, just knowing what we're all working on, making it a common goal. And then like we mentioned earlier, just tying it in with other programs, and utilizing the resources. And like Connie and all of us know, I mean, I wish MCT2D was available 10 years ago. It's just been a game changer as far as resources. When something comes up that you're like, how can we do this? Go to the MCT2D website. There may be a document on it. There may be someone who's already, went through it. So I just think that, just kind of stepping back and asking for help and seeing what other people are doing and just including everyone, it just makes it so much easier to where you're not this single pillar, feel like there's a whole team, and it's great. And regardless if it's remote or in Ann Arbor, we're in Dearborn, it's just a great thing. So I'd say start off by just utilizing what's already been done and tweaking it as needed and involving everyone. That would be the first part. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for saying that, Tiffany. And also just as a continual plug for if you guys need other resources, other tools, other things that you want that don't already exist on our website, tell us. We want to continue to support the needs that you all have around the education that you want to provide patients or your providers. So the door is always open for requests like that. Okay, so for the last question, before we open it up to the audience to
Sorry, Jackie, before
yeah.
you move on, could I just make a comment regarding the advice?
Absolutely.
I mentioned earlier that our PO has been very generous for printing a bunch of color copies. The particular MCT2D resource that I think we've used most is that medication and CGM coverage tool, which is really, really nice. And my providers love it. So we printed them because that's what they wanted. And I find them everywhere, except with the provider in the room with the patient. And so just trying to transition from that reliance on those paper reminders to more of a bookmark at the tool on the website. One of my practices, the MAs don't have like laptops or Chromebooks or whatever that they take in, but the other practices, all of the staff have the ability to look that up from within a patient appointment. It's just kind of queuing so that they remember to go on there instead of waiting until I call the patient after. But I will say that beginning with those papers and reviewing them as part of the education piece that we did, I think that was really helpful in sort of beginning to drive this change.
Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes like before getting people to be able to move online to use things, it's nice to have that paper version where people are seeing it and getting used to it and seeing the usefulness of it without having to remember to go to a website before they fully can ingratiate it into their practice. So that sounds great. Okay, so this last one, I would just love to have each panelist again, and I'll go through and call on everyone, talk about what they're planning to work on next related to improving type 2 diabetes care, whether it's continuing to develop the initiatives that we've talked about on this call and what your next steps are with that, or if you have new areas that you're planning to target and work towards. So Mary, can I ask you to go first?
Yeah, our biggest thing, and I think I kind of said it, was that starting at our next quarterly meeting with all providers, we're rolling out the smart sets. And then each clinical champion is then going to do it at their site and roll them out again. And then we're going to do follow-up, you know, and some measuring of usage. So what we did was we were able to build, we are in Epic, but we built a smart set that basically every GLP-1, GIP, every SGLT2, every insulin, everything now has a drop down. And for the GLP-1s, we have a drop down for titration start, and it includes the instructions. So when you're going, you know, it's just a bear to write, you know, every layer of a titration schedule for somebody. And it says, if you're having side effects, call, comma, other, if not, advance to whatever the next dose is like written in stone. So that we're really, everybody's been chomping at the bit. We've all been, you know, playing with them and disseminating them little by little, but now it's going to come out in one large chunk, and all you'll have to do is hit the smart set and it'll be continually updated. So that's been, yeah, we are counting on that, like warp speeding the barriers.
Yeah, it sounds like that is going to be a game changer and really exciting for your practices. Thank you. Dr. Keel, what about you? What are your next steps?
So I think I like I mentioned to you in the email, I plan to probably, for my practice at least, start off with making some 3 to 5 minutes video clips on just education in regards to what the CGM tells you, what a low carb diet means, you know, what is GLP agents do, because I know in a busy day, it starts to get a little challenging to spend 15, 20, 25 minutes with each single patient. I am in a private practice, so at the present time, I don't have a full-time care manager, but hopefully at some point I will. I do realize the immense value that they bring to the practice, but that's what my next step is, and continuing obviously with education and trying to utilize the agents as much as insurance companies allows and patient tolerates.
That sounds great. We're actually creating some short 3 to 5 minute videos on low carb diet specifically. That's a project we're working on right now. We're going to have 3 to 4 intro videos made by our dietitian, Rena. So hopefully that's something that you can use in your practice. We'll make sure to share that out with everyone once they're ready. But yeah, thinking along the same lines as us as far as next resources. Thank you, Dr. Akil.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Jennifer, what about you?
So I think we're gonna just work on tracking more on the number of patients that we have on the SGLTs and the GLP ones, as well as just trying to do more close follow-up with the patients, making sure that they are educated on the changes that we're making, so that they are on board. Because a lot of times, you know, you can explain everything to a patient and they're like, yeah, when they're in the office, and then when they're at home and trying to implement those changes, sometimes they aren't necessarily as on board as they were in the office. So so we have done a little bit of that, of just doing a little bit more like PDCM visits to keep people on track, and that seems to be helping. So I think we're going to start trying to implement that a little bit more, just to make sure that we can get people, or, you know, get our patients in the ranges that they need to be.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Jessica, what's next for your practices?
So the PDSA that we've kind of developed, still continuing our work with the medications, was to review one of the MCT2D tools on involving patients as far as contacting their insurer and looking what is my coverage, what is the cost going to be, even if it is covered. Sometimes we get patients who decline to take the medication because their cost share is too large. And this is after we've gone through a prior auth process, and it takes some time on the back end from our MAs, and we're happy to help our patients in any way, but if we could move that time, particularly one of my practices is chronically short-staffed, and so that's kind of the thought, is that we would move give the patients more self-management tools. And you know, I've kind of talked a little bit with MCT2D about maybe adapting the language on that tool to make it a little bit more reader friendly for patients. You know, who is the representative at my insurance company instead of what person did I talk to at the insurance company, just those kinds of things. But that is really what's on target for our next step.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we really appreciate you sharing that feedback on that tool, and we want to work with you on getting the language at a better level for understanding and things. So we're happy to partner with you on that.
Well, the tools are all amazing, and we do use them. So I do want to put that out there, that adjustments are helpful, but it's just been really great to have so many things right at the fingertips, especially things that are updated regularly. That's a lot of work, and it's a work that I appreciate not having to do myself.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We're so happy that it's been helpful. Connie, what about you?
We actually are getting ready to start, and next week actually will be the first one, group classes. So we're inviting patients to come and join us once every second week for you know, different aspects of diabetic management and teaching education. And we also, you know, with the CGMs and just being able to encourage, you know, some of the newer, you know, methods of self-care and the things that we can help support people in. The neat thing about classes, I think, from past history with group classes, is that patients, they really are able to support one another in a way that we can't support them, because they live in that, you know, with that, and they deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And so we don't, as practitioners, unless, you know, we have that, we really can't necessarily be all encompassing in maybe support. So group support, I think, is a good thing to add in at this point to what we're doing.
Yeah, it sounds like a great next step. And to your point, it will really help with like the patient-to-patient connection and being able to discuss things that people without type 2 diabetes won't relate to. All right, Tiffany, what about your practice? What's next?
We plan on working on linking our CGMs so that we can review them more. So we found that a lot of patients have them, and we're just not connected. So maybe they've had it for years. Just, you know, getting them to where the practitioners can see them on a bi-weekly basis. And then by doing that, we can identify the people who aren't using them and then kind of go from there. But we really want to work on the CGMs proactively as a remote monitoring type thing. So that's where we plan on going with that. And then as we set patients up or prescribe it, trying to, you know, give them a sample in the office and make sure they really want to wear it, you know, so because a lot of times we do a lot of PA work, but then they decide they don't want to wear it, and all that time is kind of lost. So we really want to just make sure we're giving the right people the right resources, make sure they want to use it, and then maximizing what we get from that information. So that's what we plan on doing.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Well, thank you again to all of our panelists. The work that you're doing in your practices is truly amazing and inspirational, and you've been able to make such important gains. I wanted to open it up to the attendees of this call and see if anyone has any questions for the panelists. If you have a question for a specific panelist and a process that they've implemented, feel free to ask that. If you just are open to anyone answering, that works as well. feel free to unmute, or you can put them in the chat if you'd like, and I'm happy to read out any questions we get. We'll give people a second or two.
I have a question. So I'm a one-person practice with a nurse practitioner, and we're not a group practice, so we can't diffuse the cost of all these embedded resources over a large network of physicians. Do you have any particular suggestions for accomplishing the program when you don't have the resources to embed all these people?
I would think I would suggest just starting off with what you have, utilizing the resources that are available on the MCT2D website, and maybe finding one staff member who's really engaged and can, whether it be a medical assistant or, a front staff, work with what you got and try to involve them all and then just go from there. Some of these, practices are really small, and MCT2D just has so many resources that it does help take that off, and then they can communicate and things like this and kind of get the support that way. But I definitely can see how it can be a little overwhelming for a small practice. But especially with the medications, but looking at those resources really helps, and especially with the formularies, that's been really helpful too with prescribing. If that helps.
Good advice.
We only have, there's just two providers in our office. We have an MA and a front staff and our office manager. And so we have been able to use like our health focus, which is our quality, to help track, our patients' A1Cs, their renal functions, all those sort of things, making sure that those are on track. So we utilize that way. We also, our PO organization will help us with quality and things like that. We don't have a whole lot of problems with PAs because our office is so small that there's not a lot of, not a lot of hands in the pot, so to speak. And so it goes right from the provider to our office manager who does all the PAs. And so it's just, it's really clean that way. And we have been able to utilize coupons and drug assistance programs and things of that sort. If you want to talk with our office manager, I'm sure that we could get that arranged to see if she has any insight for you, because she also is part of the PO.
Thank you.
If I could just add one small piece, in addition, of course, to the resources with MCT2D, but then the reps for the CGM specifically, they're phenomenal, and they would come in, help set up, whatever you need as far as the apps for monitoring Clarity and Libre View set up, and then show you how to do patient sharing with the data if you don't already have that. And then they'll go through, analyzing and how you, go through all that information, but it would be a great, and also how to order the CGMs, especially with Medicare and Medicaid. It's difficult sometimes those go through DMEs, so it's a different process than just sending it to the pharmacy. So I think if you reach out to those reps, that's a great opportunity for you and the others in the office. I think you said you have one more. So just to be able to get that app on your computers and just, and as you prescribe the CGMs, they're a great support too.
Thanks, all. That was great input. One of the questions is about Aspen Pharmacy. If it's okay, Jennifer, I'll follow up with you offline and get their contact info and answer some of these other questions. And Valerie, I'll make sure we share that out with you and with everyone else. I know it's at 1 o'clock, which is when we're supposed to end. I don't know if anyone on the panel has time to stay and answer a couple other questions. If you need to drop, by all means, feel free to drop off. But we did have a question. Do you run into any issues with providers who don't feel like they have time to assess CGM with the multiple other disease states the patients would like to address. And for getting the CGM reports of them aren't very high value and they aren't engaged with the work.
One of the suggestions, oh, sorry, Tiffany.
No, go ahead.
I dove in. One of the things that we did was, I don't know how your providers work, Bobby, but like when they do an EKG interpretation, they bill that as a separate item. If they do it once a month, and I'm going to be sharing, and I think there's some things on the MCT2D, but when we get our workflow, it talks about how to upload and such. But they get that CGM in front of them. You can, if they document, they read it. It's a provider. It's listed as physician interpret. Any provider can do it, and that's a higher billable code. So if they're working under RVUs, et cetera, that's been. And once they start doing it, it's really easy. Or if you have access, as they say, to the reps to like just do a quick and dirty, you know, you got to really keep them on the track, but like a 5 to 10 minute viewing of what a CGM value, what the value of a CGM will be. It's, we got a lot of people all of a sudden dove in because it made a big difference.
Great. Thank you so much. Tiffany, did you want to add something as well?
No, basically what Mary said, just, you know, and then if we can, you know, get the information, that's where in the future, we're hoping to be able to look at that prior to the physicians and then kind of bring it to them as care managers. But yeah, you know, showing them that the value in it and looking at what they like, you know, because you could set it up. They don't have to look at each day. They can do a summary or, you know, and it may just be the way the website looks, or it might just be overwhelming. So.
There's a lot of information on those reports.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that's helpful that I've tried to do with my providers, you're already talking with your patient about A1C. If they have a CGM, transition that conversation. Instead of talking about A1C, forget A1C. Talk about time in range, because there's a breakdown on that report that shows you how much of the percent of your day are you within that target, and it'll break it down by time. So what I find for a lot of my patients is noon to 6. Your time in range is not great, noon to 6. What change can we make between noon and 6? So that gives you a very tailored conversation. It helps the provider to engage meaningfully with that massive report that you can pull, and it gives the patient a really concrete action step.
Great, thank you so
much. The primary page so that they can look at really quick and dirty is that AGP report, where it gives like that time and range in that graph, because that's like the meat of the matter. And then it's got the graphing, and you can pull it out. And then if they have a specific day or whatever, you can roll back. But they really, if they just look at that, it's a game changer for patient conversations.
Perfect. Great feedback, everyone. That was really helpful. Just one last question, if anyone has time to answer it. Mary asked, she is a CDCES, wondering about initiating classes. How do you identify patients to participate? Is it limited to certain insurances? And is it more of a support group or a formal structured class for those panelists who are moving towards classes?
Our group at UMH West, that the reason it took so long to get the classes going was that they are billing it as a group class. So they had to meet the Michigan standards. So it's not an expensive out-of-pocket class, a cost if the patient gets stuck with the bill. But that they definitely did it as a group diabetes ed class taught by diabetes educators. I don't know if you can bill otherwise.
So in the past, I have done basically unpaid pro bono intro classes with the idea that the follow-up then is going to be a care manager meeting or you know, a CGM placement or initiation or something like that. So that, you know, my time is kind of unpaid at the front end, but then we capture some revenue downstream from that because I was willing to put the cart before the horse for a minute.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, well, thank you so much again to our panelists. It was so great to hear from you and shared really, really helpful information with everyone. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining. Like I mentioned, I'll connect with Jennifer and share the information about Aspen Pharmacy out with everyone on the call. And we really appreciate you joining. Don't forget to submit for your CME credit, and we will get this recording posted so you can reference it in the future. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend.